Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Real Gaming Podcast. I'm your host, PJ, also known on Twitch as Dirty Mike, and I've got Beardculez, also known as Drake, Drake known as Beardculez, also back here with me again for another episode talking about more Silent Hill.
Yes.
All right, so we are continuing our conversation on Silent Hill. Last week, we covered the original Silent Hill video game and the movie based on that. We're kind of switching up a little bit here. And instead of doing games based on movies, we're doing movies based on games. If you guys like these types of episodes, we'll do more of them in the future. But with October being here and talking about our favorite horror games and favorite horror movies and stuff like that, I would be remiss if I didn't do some episodes on Silent Hill, which is my personal favorite horror series, and I believe it's yours as well.
Oh, most definitely.
So anyway, we're continuing this conversation. We're actually recording these episodes back to back because we could go on and on for hours, as we realized with the last episode. We didn't know when to end. I had to cut it off because we wanted to talk so much about Silent Hill. So we'll continue talking about the series, and we'll continue talking about it, starting off with Silent Hill 3. So the first question I'm going to ask you before we get into all this stuff is, when did you first play Silent Hill 3? And also, where does this rank for you in the whole Silent Hill universe?
Oh, man. Silent Hill 3 was kind of it was a weird one for me because I feel like I didn't play it when it first came out. It was one of those games that it took me a while to get to, and I don't know really why I was put off by it at first. Maybe because I love Silent Hill 1. Silent Hill 2 is another one of my absolute favorites just because I love things that happen in Silent Hill 2 and the locations that you go to that are so much different than Silent Hill 1.
Yeah.
I feel like for me, Silent Hill 3, the reason why it took me so long to really get into is because personally, that first opening scene of the game was so hard for me to get through. You're
talking about the whole mall sequence?
Yeah, the whole mall sequence was really, really hard for me to get through. I just didn't enjoy it. Once I got past that and actually started playing the game, I really loved it, but I couldn't.
The mall sequence is very different from the rest of the Silent Hill series.
It is, and it really threw me off. And I honestly, it's hard to tell you exactly when I played this game because it was so sporadic when I actually played it and actually started enjoying it. So I couldn't really pinpoint it. It was quite a time after though the game actually came out that I actually played it and beat it.
Gotcha. So to go back a little bit, Silent Hill 3, for you who are not familiar, is a survival horror game that was developed by Team Silent, which is a production group within Konami Computer Entertainment. We talked about the history of Team Silent. Again, if you're listening to this episode, you should go back and listen to the first one we did on Silent Hill because we're going to be referencing some of that stuff. This was published by Konami for the PlayStation 2, and it's the third installment, obviously, of the Silent Hill series, and it's a direct sequel to the first game, which is interesting because the Silent Hill universe kind of takes a little overview of it. It takes this town, which we talked about the plot of this town and of Alessa in the first one, but there's this creepy town that kind of draws people in and makes them kind of relive and deal with their trauma. So with 2, which is most people's favorite Silent Hill game, huge spoiler for this, by the way, so you can skip ahead a little bit if you want. But Silent Hill 2 deals with a person who had a sick wife and ended up kind of killing her, putting her out of her misery, I guess, and having to deal with this trauma. So there's all these weird things to deal with, like sexual trauma and relationship stuff. So the characters are... The characters, the enemies, and the town are kind of representative of this type of trauma. Yeah. So Silent Hill 3 actually goes back and explains, going off of the first story, which is about Alessa and Cheryl and Harry Mason. And so this one's, instead of being like all the other games, which are just news story that are around this town and around people dealing with trauma and in this dreamlike hell world kind of coping through that, this one actually has a continuation of,
I think that's really what draw me into the game when I eventually, once I got past them all and actually started getting into the story, learning that was actually a sequel to the first game.
Well, yeah, it's not apparent right off the bat.
No, it's not at all. I think that's why I just didn't enjoy it, because I was like, I don't really like this character. It was kind of weird to start and everything. But once I got into it and actually learned that it was a sequel to it, I'm like, oh, now you got my attention. Like this I want to know like how these connect and what happens. Like, who is this girl? Why is this? And like, how do these connect?
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about this game, and then we're going to be talking about Silent Hill Revelations, which is the sequel to the movie. So it follows obviously 3 since it's a sequel to the first game / movie. But well, that's what's interesting and a difference between this and the movie right off the bat. And we'll talk about the movie later, but like, the whole fact that this game does not instantly let you know that it is a sequel. They change the character's name, and it's explained later as to why. You're playing as Heather Mason, which is actually Cheryl, which would be Henry Mason's adopted daughter. But you don't know right off the bat that that's who you are. She changes her hair color, and her and her father are basically running and hiding from town to town to avoid this cult from Silent Hill throughout their lives, and it's not instantly explained to you that that's what's going on. So I like that it does that. It doesn't just like, here's a bunch of exposition and here's a bunch of re-explanation of the first plot. It actually kind of leaves, it starts you off in the middle of something, and you're kind of having to go through this and figure out why you're there. And I actually like that. I agree with you a little bit. The mall is very different.
It is.
I like it, but it's different. It sets a mood though, for sure. It sets a very different tone. And obviously the game gets into darker, weirder territory as it goes on. But the mall itself, if you had played this game right off the bat, not knowing it was Silent Hill, it would feel very different right off the bat.
Very confusing almost.
Yeah, because I mean, the first 2 games and in a lot of the games, you start off in the town of Silent Hill. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And this one does not start you there, and it doesn't instantly explain anything.
No.
One of the things that instantly draws me to this game that's weird, we talked about the music a little bit last time, and I feel like just starting off, you kind of have to mention the music of this, because every game has a very different soundtrack, and this is the first soundtrack to feature vocals. And it kind of goes into that teenage girl angst thing a little bit.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Because you've got this kind of punk rock sounding track right off the bat, right from the opening menu. And again, it's not at all what you would think of for a horror movie, yet it somehow is creepy and works.
Yeah, I mean, it really works because you got this girl who's very distraught, very distressed. She doesn't know who she is technically, and
running from her past,
and just really pretty much angry at the world kind of feel to it. Like she's just pissed off all the time. And the music, even though it's very melodic and very eerie, it has that it
sticks in your head.
It punches that feeling of like this game is about some sort of anger and confusion. Like
there's so much teenage angst in this. Yeah. And there's a lot of teenage girl issues and problems in this. I mean, talking about the creatures in each game being representative of certain types of trauma or certain types of fears and anxieties. This game has creatures that are based on things such as like puberty and periods and like teenage pregnancy and all this angst around these things that a young teenage girl would go through. And I think that's very interesting. For me, I obviously didn't play this game till much later. I talked about that a little bit last episode, but this game, I remember this is the first real introduction I had to what Silent Hill was when I saw, I think it was X-Play, that old TV show with Adam Sessler and Morgan Webb. They were interviewing this, and I was watching they were reviewing this game, and I was watching that as a kid going, man, this looks interesting. And they seemed to really like it, and I remember it stuck in my head till eventually through Silent Hill 4, I got into the series and went back and revisited them all. But I'm not sure if I played... I think the first time I played this was the HD remake. I've definitely played the original since. I don't think there's a huge difference other than a graphical upgrade. There's some originalists that are really... The first one's the best, but I don't think there's a lot of major differences.
They did a very minor graphic upgrade, and you can play it with like the newer dub over voices and stuff like that. But
was there new dub overs for 3? There was for 2.
Yeah, actually, no, I think you're right. I think there wasn't.
3 was the same.
But for the most part, it was pretty much the same game. I mean, I don't get why people got their panties up so in a bunch.
People do that. I read though an interesting thing about when this game originally came out is it was developed for the PS2 based on the PS2's capabilities. Yeah. And that there was also an Xbox version and a PC version. and that they did not actually hold up. There was little issues and problems, things they couldn't render that took away a little bit from the game. And I guess the PC didn't have very good controller ports. So, or very control. I don't know if you could use a controller. Anyway, there was problems with that. So the best version originally of this game was the PS2 version. And I believe the HD remake is just that with, or
just
HD remaster, I guess. Not a remake.
It was just a slight rendering better.
Yeah, I want to go back and talk about the development a little bit. So Silent Hill 3, this is so weird to me. I had no idea. Was originally supposed to be a rail shooter.
Really?
I did not know this.
Thank God they didn't do that.
I'm so glad they didn't do that.
They tried that with Resident Evil, and that failed.
Yes. As a result of the initially slow sales of Silent Hill 2 in Japan, Silent Hill 3 was developed almost simultaneously along with the series Silent Hill 4: The Room. So this is very interesting. Silent Hill 2 in Japan did not originally sell super well, even though Silent Hill 2 to this day is considered by most to be the best Silent Hill game. There's debate over 2 and 3. A lot of people don't like 3 for some reason. I really like 3. We'll get into that later. But like Silent Hill 2, a lot of people think is the best game. It originally did not sell super well in Japan. Resident Evil at this time had done some rail shooter type stuff. So Konami's like, let's do that. So this goes back to what we were talking about, where the heads, the CEOs of Konami do not understand their fan base.
No, not
and
at
they're
all.
like, you know what? Silent Hill is going to suck, so we're going to create this Isle of Misfit Toys. They're going to create, Team Silent, and they're going to create a game. We'll maybe make some money back off it. We'll limit their budget. It ended up being something way different because they just weren't paying attention. And then with Silent Hill 3, they're like, oh, Silent Hill 2 didn't sell super well right off the bat, so let's go rail shooter with this. It's like they don't understand the series or the fans at all. And luckily that didn't happen. I guess they started developing it and they actually made a Silent Hill arcade game, which I did not know existed.
Yeah, they did.
And that kind of took from that. But this was, like I said, it was also developed next to Silent Hill 4, which I had read originally was not supposed to be Silent Hill at all. It was supposed to be called Room 302. Is that the room he's in? Room 302.
Yeah, I think so.
And then Konami's like, nope, we want it to be a Silent Hill game. So they had to like retrofit it a little bit into this, which I kind of want to talk about 2 and 4 a little bit because we're just talking about the series as a whole. And so that was another question I was going to ask you. Since we're skipping over 2 a little bit and we're going to be referencing it a lot, what do you think of 2? What do you think is of it overall? Is that your favorite ones, considering it's a lot of people's, or?
I would put 2 above 3. But it's not my favorite. My favorite, hands down, is still number 1.
Yeah.
Like,
okay.
I absolutely love
We've
number
talked
1.
about this before. I wish they would actually, and I know this might rub people the wrong way, the first one, the only thing that holds it back at all is the graphics. If they could completely keep it original, that would be the scariest Silent Hill game.
Oh, yeah.
By far, in my opinion.
If they would remake 1 completely the way it is, just making it with new age graphics, I literally could die a happy gamer. Like, I would be like, all right, if I die tomorrow, I played the best game in the world, re-imaged, like literally. 2, I love 2 because the biggest reason why I love 2 though is because you are following somebody else that's stuck in Silent Hill.
Yes.
Like, it has nothing to do with story of like what number 1 was. And you go to so many interesting locations of Silent Hill that you don't go to in any of the other games. Like, you go to the island. You never go to the island in any other game.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, there's just so many interesting things that
I actually love it whenever a
go
Silent
to.
Hill game has a unique place that the other ones don't
Oh, yeah,
have.
like the island's amazing. You're in that manor, that mansion, whatever you want to call it. And
Well, like for 4, the orphanage creeps me out so much. That's maybe the best level, or the apartment, because those are places you don't go in other ones.
Or like number 3, when you go to the insane asylum.
Yes. Yeah.
And that place is scary as hell.
Yes.
That's what that's why I think number 2 is one of my favorites though, because I love the manor on the island, like the whole rowboat scene where you're going to that's why I love number 2. Number 1 though is hands down my favorite game. Like, nothing can beat number 1.
What I love talking about this being developed along Silent Hill 4, because they came out pretty close to each other, is that if Silent Hill 4 originally was supposed to be a different series, which I had read some accounts of that was the case, one of the things that references back to Silent Hill 2 that I love, and I had to bring up at some point, and we'll get back into Silent Hill 3 in a minute, is the fact that we were talking about how the movie, people said it was too long, the first one, and we both said I liked the length, but it could even been longer. I would have been happy because I love the backstory and the little things that you gain from these games. And one of the things I love about these games is that in all of them, there's these little papers lying around. I know a lot of other horror games try to do this, and in a lot of other horror games, I'm just like, I don't care to read all this material that's lying around. It's not interesting, but in Silent Hill series, it is. And my favorite example of this that I always love to bring up is that in Silent Hill 2, you're finding these papers, these old newspaper clippings of this serial killer and his weird victims and him carving numbers in their chests and all like that. And that actually ends up being the plot to 4. And I love that so much. I don't know. I love the weird interconnectivity of these series and how there's little things that show up in one game that might actually be important in later games. And there's weird things going on in Silent Hill where you're almost like crossing paths with other people. And that's what's interesting about 2 in a lot of ways is you're running into people who are there stuck in their own nightmares. Like that girl, I can't think of her name, in the graveyard.
The one that was looking for her mama.
Yeah, and then the fat guy and all that stuff. But 3, anyway, let's get back to 3 a little bit. Let's talk about the plot a little bit. So obviously you start off in this mall, and I think you start off in the amusement park.
Yes. You're in this like kind of like dream of hers that you actually are starting off in the amusement park. You're seeing weird things happen. You kind of have these, you feel like you're being chased the entire time. And it's kind of like the first insight of what this character is about, but doesn't really give you much insight at all.
I kind of like how this game starts with the dream sequence.
Yes, I do too.
It just drops you right into this like nightmare amusement park. And we talked about Silent Hill 2 actually having Pyramid Head, which is kind of the mascot, if there is a mascot of the Silent Hill series.
Yes.
But I think if you had another mascot, would be
that fucking bunny.
Yeah, was it Robbie the bunny?
Something like that.
Gosh.
That thing is so damn creepy. I'm not gonna lie. That thing is super fucking
Might be
creepy.
one of the creepiest things in all of Silent Hill.
It doesn't do anything. It just pops up randomly in scenes. Like it just sits there.
It's just a plush toy. It's just a plush pink bunny, but sometimes it'll have like blood around its mouth, and it's like, all right, I'm done.
Cool. All right, there's a bunny with blood coming out of its eyes and around its mouth.
That's actually one of the weird ways they linked 4 into 3 is that you're looking through the peephole at one point in your neighbor's apartment, and there's like a Robbie the bunny plushie on her bed, and it's like, oh, fuck. But it starts off there, and then she wakes up in this burger joint, and she's trying to get back home to her dad. And that's the first time in any Silent Hill game that I can think of where Silent Hill is, or the whole essence, the dream world limbo state of Silent Hill is actually reaching far outside of its town.
Yes, like it's actually expanding and
into
capturing people outside of its town.
Yeah, so the mall ends up becoming this nightmare world. The mall, I know we keep talking about it. It is such a weird thing because it's like it's all daylight.
Yeah,
it's not the same type of horror, but it's so strange.
It has a very
the game starts
unique eerie to it.
I feel like the game starts off putting you in this dream world more than trying to scare you because it starts off with a much more dream like quality and dream motifs, and I kind of like that because I could see how at first it would be a little weird to get into this game. Considering it starts off different and it's not, I don't think the beginning's as scary, but it's definitely setting something up. And it quickly goes from this. I think the subway is next, right?
Yes.
So the subway is also something that's featured in 4 and it's featured in maybe some of the other games, but it's a different subway in 4, but just like a subway type levels, right? And you get back and you find out that the cult from Silent Hill is actually coming to try to get you. Mm-hmm. And you find that it's killed your father.
Yep.
Who at this point in the game, I think, or maybe later on, you find out is Harry Mason from the first game. So you kind of realize that Claudia Wolf, this cult leader, this new cult leader of Silent Hill, this cult they call the Order, is trying to come back and complete the objective of the first game, which is to use Cheryl or Alessa, good Alessa, the combination of two, whatever, to birth their god.
What they believe is their god, which is really demon deity.
Yeah, I feel like some people misunderstand this part of the game. They're like, well, they're trying to birth God. Does that not make them? I'm like, it's their God.
It's a cult.
Like, it's basically tells you throughout the game that they're bringing Satan's son into the world.
Yeah,
It's like,
pretty much.
They call it God, but it doesn't mean it's like Jesus or something. You know? Very different God. And Claudia Wolf, this new cult leader, kills your dad and kind of draws you to Silent Hill. There's also this detective that's following you around.
Mm-hmm.
And from what I remember, the detective was hired by the cult to find you and then take you back to Silent Hill, but realizes who they are and starts to warn you.
Yeah.
Which is something they kind of get right in the movie as well, but it changes very different. We're going to be talking about the movie a little bit more in a minute. But this basically all of this kind of draws you back to going to Silent Hill.
Oh yeah, the entire time, like the cult is doing everything they possibly can, plus her own curiosity is just reeling you back into Silent Hill to figure out who you are, why did this cult come after you, and why did this cult kill your family? Because the character has no real memory of who she was.
Well, yeah,
what.
because I think what this is going off of is the good plus ending, and that's what's interesting is this actually gives you some canonical indication of which endings are real. And there are some really interesting YouTube videos out there that tell you, based on the way other Silent Hill games go, which endings are the true endings.
Yes.
And if I'm correct, I think it's pretty much always the good plus ending is what is considered canonical.
Yeah, because in Silent Hill 1, when you get the good plus ending, you, who is Henry Mason, I can't remember because they changed the name so much.
It's Harry Mason in the game.
Harry Mason and Sybil run away run away with an infant that is technically Alessa and Cheryl combined.
Yes.
And that's who technically Heather is. So Heather would have no memory of what happened there or who she was because she was reborn as an infant.
Which also makes it a little weird that this game jumps so much forward in time.
Oh yeah, I mean,
it makes the chronology of these games a little confusing, but yeah.
Which, I mean, that's probably
doesn't matter a ton.
It doesn't matter a ton, and I feel like it was done on purpose to keep that questioning there. So.
Yeah, for sure. And you kind of explore this town. You find creatures and people and characters from the first game. Leonard Wolf being one of the main things that's going to show up in the story. And there's a lot more stuff about the Order. What are your favorite levels in this game?
The Insane Asylum.
Insane Asylum
is one of my favorite. It's excuse me. It's so eerie and creepy, and the task that you have to do is crazy, and you got that guy coming over the intercom and stuff, like talking to you, and you do like that happy birthday sequence and everything.
Yeah.
There's just so many things about that whole area just really scary. I mean, there's no real good way to put it, I guess. It really starts to mess with your mind, and you're like, how does this pertain to what I'm doing? And it's been a long time since I played the game, so I can't remember exactly, but like everything somehow connects, even with that Insane Asylum and why she's there and what happened there and why it's a significant part of the game.
I specifically remember the apartments being really creepy.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, I don't know. That one always kind of sticks out to me. I remember some really weird stuff about the apartments. I've played these games multiple times. It's been a minute since I played 3. I didn't have a chance to completely fully replay it before doing this, so I'm going off a lot of memory here.
Right.
But I always have this debate too, whether I like 2 or 3 better. 3 was one that a lot of people didn't like. They cited the shortness of the game being a thing. I've beaten 3 in a single setting before. It depends on how you play it and how good you are at the puzzles. I think you can do it in like 8 hours or less, but I enjoy it. I actually kind of like a really good horror game that you can beat in a one long session, but I really like 3. So I want to talk about the reception of this game a little bit. So Silent Hill 3 got mostly positive reviews. It gets an 85 out of 100 on Metacritic for the PlayStation 2 version. As I said, the PC version had problems. It got a 72 out of 100 average score.
And that probably comes a lot with porting it over. It's really hard to port certain games over to PC, so...
Yeah, they said there was some technical issues, poor gamepad controller support, things like that. Positive reactions were given to the general horror and atmosphere of this game, including the truly horrifying sections, and it packs some genuine scares, and the feeling of eeriness and doom is almost overwhelming, were some things that people said. I wanted to actually ask you this because Silent Hill is a game series that does not generally rely on jump scares. It relies on fears of the unknown. It relies on this whole creepy atmosphere. The music is a big part of it. But there are some genuinely good jump scares in these games.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like 3 had maybe my favorite one, but I want to kind of ask you about some moments throughout the series that you really enjoyed as far as like jump scares. I think I know which one you're going to say first.
One of my favorite jump scares, and it wasn't even me who got scared by the jump, but Silent Hill 2 has a pretty good one where you walk into this locker room and there's this just rattling, this intense rattling of a locker just going nuts. And I'm playing at this point and I'm like, I don't want to open this locker. I have no necessary reason to open this locker. And my buddy's like, give me the controller. So he yanks it out of my hand. He walks up and grabs He grabs the controller and he opens his locker. And I'm not kidding you. That locker opened and a cat jumps out and runs out. He literally chucks the controller in the air and runs out of the room. Like that's by far one of my favorite jump scares, because you're like, you walk into this locker room, you've been in there before and you're like, nothing's happening in this locker room. You come back and revisit it and all of a sudden this locker's rattling and you're like, nope, I know how this goes. No. So, I mean, yeah, like that's probably one of my favorite jump scares.
There's that really good one in 3, I want to mention, is there's this time where you find a mannequin, and I try to remember if it's got like a katana. You get a katana in this part.
Yep.
And you see this mannequin. I think you grab the katana from it. You walk away, and all of a sudden you hear a scream and a slice, and you're like, "What the fuck?
What just happened?"
It's like so for you. If you turn around and go back to look at the mannequin's head is chopped off, but it's bleeding.
Yeah,
like it's literally this bleeding mannequin. It's like stuff like that sticks out. 4 had some really creepy moments. This whole idea of being the apartment being your safe space. I hate using that word, but basically it's what it is, right? Is the whole idea of 4 was to take this place that is supposed to make you feel safe and turn it into something that is terrifying.
Oh, yeah.
And that is why I love 4 in so many ways, because you have this apartment you are in, and it's this first person mode. And every time you leave it, you go out into these weird worlds of Silent Hill, but you can go back to the apartment. And we talked about this before, like there's times in Silent Hill where you just need a breather.
Oh,
you
yeah.
like pause the game and walk away. And in Silent Hill 4, the apartment's creepy-ish, but you go back there and you're like, okay, nothing's going to kill me here. I'm safe. This is fine. And then you get halfway through the game. It's like, nope. There's like baby heads growing out of the walls. There's a skinned cat in your refrigerator at one point. Or there's a lot of times you look through the peephole in your apartment and you'll see like people in the hallway and stuff like that. And one time you look through and there's like dude with blood on his face just like staring back at you, or there's like a dead version of yourself.
Oh yeah.
It just starts to fuck with you so much. And I love that whole aspect of the series. I feel like this series, for a series that does not rely on jump scares, it definitely does the ones that it does super well.
Oh
in
yeah,
a lot of
because
these games.
they're not stereotypical, I guess. Like they're a lot more thought out, and they make you go like, why did that just happen? kind of thing. like the whole mannequin thing. You grab the katana, you go back and you're like, why is this thing chopped up and bleeding? Or the cat, like, why was there randomly a cat now locked in this locker that I was just in like 20 minutes ago? Like kind of stuff like that. It just makes you think on top of it, which makes a better jump scare than just like, boo.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a 2-year-old can jump out from a corner and scare you, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
But that's the thing is like when they do have jump scares, there's something a little bit more to them.
Oh, yeah.
Like I said, the mannequin, like it wasn't just that it made a noise and jump scared you. It's that, okay, like there's a mannequin that's bleeding behind it. Like what the hell is up with this?
Who chopped his head off and why is it bleeding?
Yes. Some more stuff about the reception and the reviews of this game. The story, one of the things says the story told is part of an atmosphere that was also received positively, making for a satisfying, coherent sequel. Although its status as such is meant that it may be a little tough for people who have not played the first game to follow, despite a laudable effort for people to catch up on. Again, I don't I don't really care about criticisms like this. It's like, oh, I didn't understand it because I didn't watch the first one. It's like, that's how sequels work.
Yeah, that's weird.
I've never understood that criticism from people about video games any more than I've understood it about movies. If you're trying to create a really good video game universe, it should be the same as a movie. I don't go into Lord of the Rings Twin Towers and be like, what the fuck's going on? I don't get it. This is a terrible movie because they didn't tell me about the Fellowship of the Ring. It's like, go watch the Fellowship of the Ring.
They didn't spend 40 minutes at the beginning explaining the first movie that I should have watched in the first place.
Yeah, and that's going to be one of my main criticisms of the movie we'll talk about in a minute. But it's like, when people say that in reviews, like, well, I didn't fully understand it because it didn't explain the first game well enough. It's like, you could have played the first game. It's like crazy. That's how stories work.
It's real crazy.
Right? There was some negative criticism about this game too. People basically cite the lack of innovation in gameplay. The game doesn't do anything major that the series hasn't done before, and does little in terms of innovation, and doesn't offer much beyond other titles. Which again, is not.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
That's my thought too. Is like, it takes away the tank controls that the first two games had, so that is a help. Other than that, that's only the real thing. Like, what do you want to change about it? It's a new story. It's scary. It doesn't have to be like, oh, and now you can like jump and dodge and there's quick time events. Like, some of the later series tried to innovate the gameplay and did not succeed.
No, I mean, if you have a good system, why change it?
Some of the later gameplay mechanics I didn't like. Like, four innovated the gameplay in a way that I liked. But it didn't innovate the combat very much or anything like that. It was really very similar.
It stayed to the core for the most part.
It was stuff like Homecoming that tried to add like weird dodge and quick time events. And as much as I'm enjoying Origins that I'm playing through right now, like, I don't really feel like I need a Wind Waker Breath of the Wild type breakable weapons thing all the time. Like, it doesn't add to the horror story of the game. It's a new gameplay mechanic, but you don't have to add new gameplay mechanics to something that's not based on. It's like this for me. Like, both of these criticisms that I just read are the same things that I defend when I play games like Metal Gear Solid, another Konami series that I love, and I want to talk about Silent Hill PT a little bit too.
Oh yeah,
but you have to play all of the games if you really want the story in Metal Gear Solid. You don't have to do that in Silent Hill, but for 3, it's kind of imperative that you've played the first game or understand the story. And that, again, is how sequels work. And also, if you have a really good story, if you've got a really good, interesting game, you don't have to update and innovate the gameplay all the time, because these are not they're not games that are just meant to. They're more than just the buttons. You know what I mean? It's more than just, this is new and innovative gameplay. It's not a Call of Duty or something like that where it's all about that. It's not even a fighting style game where you want to add new combos and things. You want a story. You want to be drawn into a universe, and you want to be compelled by it. And that's why I like games like Silent Hill. That's why I like games like Metal Gear Solid, because it really is a lot more about the universe, the atmosphere, and the story.
Yep.
It's taking what you would get from a movie but making it 10 times better because you're involved in it. And it's more longer and in depth. I mean, that's why I enjoy video games like this so much.
Like, Homecoming is such a good example about this, because Homecoming has a great story. It follows the idea of Silent Hill and the equation of Silent Hill.
Sure.
But the thing that made me not like the game and took me forever to actually beat that game is they changed the combat so much that it damn near made the game unenjoyable until it took me 3 playthroughs to start actually mastering the combat to actually make the game enjoyable, because they changed the combat so much that I just got frustrated and irritated with the game. And
if you're playing Silent Hill for the combat, I think you're missing the point.
Yeah, and that's like, I don't play Silent Hill for combat. I want to walk up and be like, oh shit, I better smack the shit out of this thing real quick so that way I can move on. But I don't want to like spend 20, 30 minutes on a boss battle because I didn't dodge at the right time.
Yeah.
And killed and like didn't hit it. Like I don't want to do that. I play it for the eeriness, I play it for the plot, and I play it for the riddles.
And I've said this a million times before, and I'll keep saying it because I think horror game developers need to understand this. In a horror game that's truly terrifying, it becomes less scary the more you die. If you have a game where you constantly feel like you're going to die, but you don't, That is the perfect blend of horror. You want to get through a horror game. Hopefully, you want the people playing the horror game to get through it without dying at all, but always feeling like they could and always feeling like they're just on the verge of dying. And the Silent Hill games seem to do this really well in most of the iterations, this one included. But once you start dying, you realize, oh, it's just a game. It takes you out of it, right? You're like, oh, I died and respawned, and I'll just keep dying and respawning.
Oh, here I go trying this part for the 6th time now.
It's not scary anymore. Yeah. And that's where Silent Hill Homecoming kind of fell apart a little bit.
Yeah, it did. And like I said, I really not to spend a ton of time on this, but I really enjoyed it because it started.
Okay. I kind of wanted to go over the series as a whole a little bit on this one. So we talked about it so much in the last one.
It started expanding like why Silent Hill, like the neighboring towns and stuff like that. And like I enjoyed that aspect. Like, okay, so there's more to Silent Hill and the neighboring towns than like just the basic story of Alyssa and that Silent Hill. Like, and I enjoyed that, but it really got a drawback for me personally, just because the combat was so irritating. Like, all right, well, you got to dodge here and then smack this and then walk back and then dodge and like it just is like, I don't want to play this game. I don't want to play a game like this for combat. If I want to play that, I play fucking Assassin's Creed.
Yeah, I felt that way a little bit about Origins when I first started, but then I realized that what made Origins fun was the fact that you really couldn't kill the creatures as much, and you had to play it the way the games are kind of more intended to be played. You do get the better end of these games by not killing stuff, actually. So in Origins, I was having to shut off my flashlight more and
sneak around
more, and I was like, okay, so it's actually kind of forcing me to play the game the way that you're really supposed to a little bit, whereas I would normally just kill everything. It made Origins kind of a little bit scary for that reason.
Yeah,
so I like that
more
innovation.
Of the survival.
Yeah, I like that innovation a little bit more as I got into it, but I will agree, Homecoming, the combat does take away from it.
It does. It really does.
That's why I don't feel like 3 has to innovate. I feel like as far as drawing you into this scary universe and drawing you into these scenarios and giving you creatures and a plot that's fascinating, I think 3 does great. I really, really enjoyed 3. I think we should probably talk about the movie a little bit, and then I kind of want to go back into the expanded universe of Silent Hill and where it's going and some things like that.
Definitely.
But yeah, so Silent Hill 3 obviously was kind of transformed into this movie in 2012 called Silent Hill Revelations. And this one was directed and written by M.J. Bassett. So they originally tried to get the guy who directed the first Silent Hill in on this, and he had other projects at the time, wasn't able to do it. And the guy Avery, I think, so Christopher Gans was the guy who directed the first film, and he was busy. And Roger Avery had planned to return to write the sequel because he wrote the first movie, but he was arrested in 2008 for vehicular manslaughter. So that kind of put a kibosh on that.
All right. Well.
So in 2009, video game artist Masahiro Ito, who participated in the development of multiple installments of Silent Hill series, was asked to design the creatures and look of the otherworld dimensions of this film, but declined because of other obligations. So right off the bat, you've got the team that made the games and movies so good, the first movie and the games so good.
Not able to
do this movie.
Oh, man.
And on top of that, you've got a movie that's budget is slashed way back. So we talked about how the first movie looks so damn good that even the people that didn't like it were all saying, wow, this movie looks fantastic.
Cinematically,
actually, one of the things I forgot to bring up with the last episode was that there was a review that said, this is the best looking bad movie I've ever watched. I don't agree it's a bad movie, but it does look fantastic.
Like the cinematic work and the way they did colors and the mood they brought to it, it's gorgeous.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous film, whether you like the plot of it or not. But this movie had none of that. It didn't have the original director, it didn't have the original writer, it didn't have the artist from the games, and it didn't have the budget. So going into that, it's already looking a little bad, right?
A little bleak.
The next thing that they do is they decide this is going to be a 3D movie. And if you're not familiar with 3D movies and how that works, is the way the camera has to work to make the 3D look good really limits the artistic expression.
Yeah, because you have to be so direct on with something.
Yeah, you can't do certain camera angles. You can't do certain focusing techniques because everything has to be in focus.
Yep.
And it has to be, it really limited this movie in so many ways. But apparently, and I've never seen this in 3D, apparently the 3D in this movie looks fantastic.
I
was watching this again, and my original thoughts was, damn, this movie was made for 3D because you can tell they are pushing the 3D angle very, very hard early on, and in a lot of scenes where I'm watching it going, this scene looks dumb, but if it was 3D, I could see what the point is, like the creatures reaching towards you with the knives and things like that. And I guess even like the snow and ash falling down in parts of the movie looked really cool in 3D.
Oh, I bet.
But I didn't see this in 3D. When did you first see this movie?
I didn't see it in 3D yet either, but I'm not a huge person to go into movie theaters, to be honest with you. But I saw it shortly after it came out on DVD, like came out on actual disc form.
Yeah.
And after watching the first one and then seeing this, you could definitely tell that was not the same team that made
definitely
it.
not.
And it just didn't hold up as good, honestly. Like they stretched so much stuff more in this movie that I just did not enjoy.
Yeah, I did not enjoy this movie overall very much either. I went into this movie. I didn't see it in theaters. I saw it after it came out. I saw the trailers and went, yeah, this is gonna be bad.
And that's why I didn't go see it in theaters.
And I'd already liked, at this point, I was getting into the Silent Hill games and series, and I really liked the original movie. And I'm like, this movie's gonna suck. Eventually, it came out on DVD. And I remember watching it, going into it, and I feel like this always happens for me because I'm one of those people that is not too good for a popcorn film. I know a lot of people will diss on certain movies and be like, oh, that movie's terrible. And it's like, but I love like highbrow films, and I love thoughtful films, and I love good films, and I can tell the difference, but that doesn't mean that I'm too good to watch a movie that's just fun to watch.
Yeah.
That's why I don't have as much problem with the Fast and Furious series or things like that. It's like, yes, I'm going into it knowing that it's going to be ridiculous. I guess the next Fast and Furious film, they're going to space. I'll probably watch it because it's just a movie. I'm going to sit there and eat popcorn.
You've already seen all the other ones.
Yeah. It's like, whatever. I'm going to enjoy this. I'll watch somebody jump a car over the moon and do kinds of crazy shit.
Like, they landed on Mars.
Yeah. It's like, I'm not going into this or defending this as this is a great piece of film. I think that's why there's a difference between film and movies. So I went into this thinking this is going to be terrible, but whatever, I'll watch it. And I remember the first time I watched it, I was kind of like, oh, this was fun. You know, it's like not anything like the series, not anything like the first movie. But I remembered kind of liking it. And I got to say, I watched this again 2 days ago, and I couldn't even get to that point. I did not like this movie.
I'm not going to lie. Like, I watched it, like I said, when it originally came out on DVD, like I went and rented it or some shit, and I watched it. And then, like, I watched it a couple months ago, and I'm like, I have no recollection of this movie. Like, I felt like Gandalf. Like, where the hell am I doing?
Yeah, I remembered it way different than what it was.
I was like, huh, that happened? Okay.
It was just right off the bat corny. Like, we keep talking about how Silent Hill works in the fear of the unknown, but right off the bat, you've got the mall, obviously. First of all, it explains the plot right away. Like, it goes right into all the stuff that you're supposed to kind of find out as it goes along.
The detective pretty much just lays it all out right at the beginning.
Well, even before that, it's like she's talking to her dad. She's like, we've been running from town to town, and I've changed my name a bunch of times. It's like, okay, that was supposed to come out later. Like, you should put some mystery to it, right? And it just explains it all right off the bat. And then the detective comes. He's like, hey, my name's Detective Exposition. Here's what's going on. He dies, he was an important character in the game, but it doesn't matter, right? They kill him right off the bat.
We don't need this character anymore.
What really instantly jarred me this time watching it was the mall scene. It goes instantly from, instead of trying to be the fear of the unknown and creepy, it's instantly like, let's make this movie gross. And I'm like, that's the opposite of why I like Silent Hill. I like Silent Hill because it's not a slasher flick. It's not just trying to gross you out. And it just, like, there's this, she walks past a kitchen, there's a guy like slicing meat off of a human being and cooking it. And
I didn't get that at all. Like, why did they have her like have these, like,
it didn't make
subconscious experience in real life?
It didn't even fit with the way that Silent Hill works, as being you're in normal world, then you're in limbo, then you're in hell world.
Yeah.
It was just like, it looked more like a hallucination.
Yeah, exactly. Like, she was just daydreaming this stuff.
I did not get it. The instant, like the mall scene in the first game we talked about a little bit, but it does kind of set up an atmosphere.
Yeah.
And in this, it was like telling you what to expect from this movie in the worst possible way. It was like, hey, by the way, some of the monsters in this are going to be just actual humans, which also annoyed me a lot. I don't know.
they were too upfront about it, and not enough like mystery foreshadowing at all.
Yeah, and then so some of the complaints of the first movie was that it wasn't explained well enough for the lower tier of film growth. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be a jerk, but like it was not that hard to understand. And people were like, they didn't lay it out on a platter for me. And this movie's like, hey, you know what we'll do? We'll lay it out on a platter for you and really over explain. Like I feel like
force feed it to you.
I feel it was so force fed.
Oh, dude,
I
it was
felt
so
like
bad.
2/3 of this movie were exposition.
Yeah.
Like by the time that you find, also Harry's not dead, he's kidnapped in this one.
Yeah.
And her mom comes back in this weird dream sequence and tries to rectify the fact that the movie ended different than the game, which I was fine with the movie ending different in the first one. As long as the sequel would have been, hey, here's a new story. Here's James. Or here's, like a different character. Instead, they're like, oh, well, we want to make it the direct sequel. So we're going to have to change the end of one to explain how Cheryl comes back and all this stuff. And anyway, it didn't really make a lot of sense. But there's just so much exposition that even after she goes back, finds her dad is missing, the police are chasing her for some reason.
Yeah.
And she runs off with this other new kid at her school, Vincent, which, if you're a fan of the series, should be an instant like, oh, Vincent. Because Vincent literally name drops his grandpa, Leonard Wolf.
Yeah, I know.
On the bus right at the beginning of the movie. And I was like, if you were trying to shock people, like you literally just told people, hey, I'm from the cult and my grandpa is that creepy dude in the prison or in the insane asylum from the game. Like drops all of the hints right away. There's no surprise to this.
It's so bad how they just like we said, force feed it to you what's happening.
It's a very force-fed movie. And anyway, so by the time they're driving to the town, it's like, all right, are we done with the exposition? Can we stop? Like, we're halfway through this shorter film.
Yeah.
And
like an hour and a half.
It's only an hour and a half, if that. And we're halfway through this film, and it's still just exposition. And they're just over-explaining the plot. And I'm like, in a movie or in a game series that's based off of dreams and dream logic and supposedly Jacob's Ladder and Twin Peaks and all these things are its references or inspirations.
Inspiration, yeah.
You're not catching any of that at all. And this to me is where it went completely sideways. Whereas the first movie was a movie for gamers who liked the game. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't this mass marketed appeal. It still did really well. I think a lot of people really liked it. But this was like, hey, you know what we'll do? We'll make this the lowest form of entertainment, and we're just going to make this a quick cash grab. People might recognize the name Silent Hill. And you realize that when you're using a title, like, hey, this is based off of a license. So we're trying to draw in fans of Silent Hill, but let's also make it for not at all for fans of Silent Hill. I don't understand that as a marketing ploy.
Definitely after you already made one movie, like that was more or less...
That did well, by the way. Well, like, it doesn't matter if the reviewers hated it. It doesn't matter if Rotten Tomatoes hated it. It did well.
It did well, and you just take that whole equation and you're like... All right, well, let's flop this and do the complete opposite to just make money, hopefully.
The plot moves super fast. It's also got young Kit Harington before Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Which I haven't watched all of Game of Thrones, but he's a terrible actor in this movie.
Oh, yeah, he's god-awful.
I don't know if he's bad in everything, but he's bad in this. The girl, I can't remember her name. The girl I got to play Heather Mason looks like a young Michelle Williams, and she does good. Mm-hmm. I mean... Both movies have Sean Bean, and I've always been a fan of Sean Bean. That's another funny thing to me is I feel like this is the only movie series. I always joke about Sean Bean dies and everything. Somehow he makes it through both of these movies. I
don't know how.
He makes it through 2 horror movies where he's supposed to die. Somehow. It's like, it's Sean Bean. Like, how did you... Isn't it in his contract you have to kill him in everything? So... I always joke, like, I want to see a movie where Sean Bean survives, and then I see this one, I'm like, maybe I don't want to see a movie where Sean Bean survives.
He actually got to the point where it was so bad that he died in so many things, he literally said, I'm not playing any more roles where I die.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. Where else? I just did not find this movie holding up in the creepy factor, in the dreamlike factor. I don't know. Like they tried to do some mannequin stuff, and that mannequin monster was not even from 3. Wasn't that from Homecoming?
2? Yeah, maybe Homecoming. Yeah,
I swear
And,
the
like,
mannequin monster was from Homecoming or something.
They did the whole carousel thing, but it wasn't even right. The part where they did with the carousel, like you fight yourself, which I don't know. It was
Well, in the original game, you fight the Dark Alessa on the carousel, and it's a boss battle, and it's a lot more intriguing. In this, she just is like, let's hug and become one again.
Yeah, like they just did so many things to try to force it to make some sort of nuance to the game, but it really wasn't the game.
They over-explained the plot so much that it almost became incoherent. And one of the things that I didn't like, a big thing I didn't like, is some of the things from the games you have to like earn this knowledge through multiple playthroughs and through talking with people that really becomes a thing. Like, it's not instantly told to you that these games are about people's trauma and them dealing with it. You kind of have to like extrapolate this a little bit. And it's not instantly told to you that this is definitely working based on dream logic and that Silent Hill definitely changes for every character that comes here and things warp and change depending on who you are and the town is playing off of that. That's some knowledge you earn from playing through the games and understanding them. And in the movie, they just outright say all these things and over explain. And it really takes away, like, there's no part of this movie where you're going back and going, I wonder about this, or maybe this meant that, or I wonder. There was no.
They just laid it out on the line for you in this movie.
Yeah, it was so spoon-fed of a movie that it's just becomes unenjoyable for a series that's so well thought out and understands its references so well. Like we were talking about, I've never actually seen Jacob's Ladder, but they all are kind of based on this idea of Jacob's Ladder, and even to the point where Silent Hill Homecoming, which we keep bringing up, is basically the plot is that of Jacob's Ladder. It's this guy who comes back from the war and has trauma and has to deal with it, and they even name things in the games based off of these. They make overt references to Jacob's Ladder and Twin Peaks and Stephen King novels and a lot of other things. And they just don't understand the source material or the references here at all. Even the director of this movie came out later and was like, "Yeah,
I messed up.
This is bad."
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So my point is, obviously, we've been talking about the Silent Hill series last week and this week, and how much we love the games, and we both agreed that we liked the first movie. I wanted to say something more positive about this movie because I remembered watching it and thinking, okay, for an action-oriented, not a horror, scary, or paranormal-oriented, because it's not that. I remember thinking back to when I'd first seen it and going, oh yeah, for a kind of more action-oriented, cheesier film, it's not bad. And then I watched it and I was like, no, this is way worse than I remember.
Yeah, that's exactly how I felt. Like I watched it, like I said, not that long ago, a couple months ago. And I remember watching and I go, God, this is way worse than what I remember. Like
I can't even think of what to bring up in this movie that was worth talking about. Like Pyramid Head is in it a lot, obviously. Like he was in the first one, but it made more sense.
Yeah, it definitely
And in this
did.
one, it was like Pyramid Head is just everywhere. They're just like, hey, you know what people like about Silent Hill?
Pyramid Head.
Let's just make him run the carousel, and he'll also defend Heather at the end for some reason.
Yeah, like fight the demon at the end.
I also forgot Carrie Ann Moss was in this. Trinity from the Matrix movies. Completely forgot she played Claudia Wolf. They totally changed Vincent's character from being this creepy cult leader to being the good guy, which I didn't like. I feel
like falls in love with Heather and tries to protect her. And I was like,
why did they have to? I've said this a million times. Not every movie and story has to be a romance love story. And them forcing that into a Silent Hill game was so
like they get out at the end with which ties into Origin, but they like get out the end and they get in with that truck driver.
Yeah,
and I'm like,
that was just such a cheap, quick tie-in that it was unnecessary.
To be completely honest, they would have just killed him in the movie because he betrayed the cult, and they would have moved on. Like that would have been it.
Yeah, I honestly, I don't know where to go because it's not a very coherent story and there's not a lot to say about it other than it's not a good movie.
Yeah.
Silent Hill, so talk about the reception of this movie. It opened at number 5 at the box office, taking a weekend of $8 million and grossed $55 million worldwide. So it was moderately successful because it only had a $20 million budget. So the first movie had nearly a $60 million budget, but it made over $120 million.
Yeah.
This had a $20 million budget and it grossed like somewhere around 35 million. So it didn't
barely made its money back.
It made money, but it just was not nearly the success of the first one, and that's what I don't understand. Is the first one was successful, so why they wouldn't continue in that vein? I think originally they tried to, but of course they didn't have Christopher Gans directing it and Roger Avary writing it. They couldn't get people from the games to work on it, so I don't know if they were always planning on making it a lower budget, or if they're just like, yeah, the studio does not believe in this anymore.
Yeah, like we don't have anybody from the original, so let's just make a low budget and see what happens.
Yeah, so this movie was obviously panned by critics. It currently holds a 10% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes, where I'll probably actually agree with them.
No, yeah.
Based on 60 critics with an average rating of 2.96 out of 10. The site's critical consensus reads, mediocre effort even by the standards of video game adaptations. Silent Hill Revelation 3D features a weak characters and an incomprehensible plot with a shortage of scares. That's the other thing. I didn't find even I didn't find anything in this movie that freaked me out.
No, there wasn't like literally anything in this movie that was...
I'm not saying the first one was super terrifying, but it stuck with you.
Yeah, there was parts where you're like, wow, that's messed up. Like, bare minimum, you're like, that's messed up. Like,
it definitely had a creepy factor where you will think about it later. You know what I mean? I think I've even had like nightmares or dreams, at least, like, about Silent Hill, the first movie. Like after I watched it when I was pretty young. I watched it right after it came out. So this was before I'd even played the games. So I would have been like 14 or 15, something like that. I guess in high school, like freshman in high school or something like that.
I mean, a good scene from that movie is like when they get stuck in that room with the fan and all those bugs are coming in and Pyramid Head's trying to break in and like steal them, and like all of a sudden they get saved because the world finally goes back to normal. But like even just that was like a creepy crawly kind of like that nasty kind of feel
aspect to it. And this one I remember watching it and going like, I'm lost on what's going on. First of all, like even with as much exposition as they give, I'm like, what's the point? Like I still can't remember why she went to the insane asylum to find Leonard Wolf. I don't know.
Yeah, like the whole amulet thing, and they gave it to him, and he turned into some weird demon.
It was just some really cheaply thrown together plot devices. It completely defied what made the games good or the logic of those games. It was just like pushing you from one area to the next so fast. Like one of the complaints about the first movie is they said, "Oh, there's a lot of people walking around." I'm like, yes,
that's what the game is.
Point. Like it's people walking around a creepy environment and solving a mystery.
Yeah,
that's the slow burn of it was what made it good. Whereas this is like, all right, we're gonna go here and here and here and here and here, and hold on, we only have to have dialogue as long as it's overly explaining the plot of the first movie again, and then trying to somehow force a plot into this one that doesn't exist. And it ends with Harry Mason basically going after his wife that's been stuck in Silent Hill all these years, and her and Kit Harington, Vincent, whatever, they run off in the sunset together because they've known each other for 24 whole hours. And he originally tried to betray her, and then he helped her, and that means that they're in love or something.
Yeah.
Super forced. I don't know. So on Metacritic, the film got an average 16 out of 100 based on 14 critics, and Dennis Harvey of Variety said that Silent Hill Revelation 3D is a cheaper, cheesier sequel that's worse than its predecessor on every level, save for being a half hour shorter, and takes no special advantage of the stereoscopic process. I still am just going to disagree. I don't think the first movie was too long, but
no, not at all. But I agree with everything else.
Yeah, I agree with
everything. I completely agree with everything else on that.
Yeah.
I mean, you can definitely tell that they had a lower budget, and they were just, it was like a speed run. It's like watching somebody speed run a video game. Like that's how bad it was.
And actually, what I've never understood, just to go into that, like I've never understood speed running of games very much. Anyway, like I've watched a few speed runs that are kind of fun, but I never understood watching speedrunners of Silent Hill. It's like, isn't that kind of missing the point of what makes these good? Like you're supposed to be kind of in this atmosphere and enjoying it, and I don't feel like. I don't know. It's just my opinion on it. I know there's a lot of speedrunners.
Seems like a waste of gameplay, honestly.
Yeah. See, my thing with Silent Hill is I've replayed the game so much because I give them time to breathe and try to kind of forget certain things. So when I go back and play, I might not remember how a puzzle is done or something. And I'll go back to the games after giving them enough time where it feels fresh again.
And it feels nice. It's like you said, fresh. It's refreshing to replay the game.
Yes,
it is. Like you're like, I know this game, but I don't know enough of it to make it like, oh yeah, I've played this game before.
You can jump back into these worlds after a certain amount of time and really enjoy and find new things. And
yeah.
I that's why they have so much replayability to me. Like I give them some time and I go back and revisit them. I do the same with some of my favorite game series. I do it with Metal Gear Solid because I want to go back into that story. And this is a perfect relive it. This is a perfect example of that. But I want to. I don't feel like there's a ton else to say about the movie other than it's
god
obviously
awful,
terrible.
But,
The game Silent Hill 3 is great. The first 4 games are the really canonical ones that were all made by Team Silent, and I think they're all really good. Are there some other Silent Hill games that people should look out for or play, or what would be kind of your overall like maybe rankings of the series? I kind of want to give like a overview of what people should be playing.
I mean, 1 through 4, definitely play through 1 through 4. Like,
absolutely.
It definitely 1 through 3. At bare minimum, play 1 through 3.
A lot of people don't like 4, and I love it. It might be because of my first one, but I think that what we talked about earlier with the idea of making the apartment scary is such a unique aspect of that game that I would suggest that.
I also love 4. Like unfortunately, I've only played it once, and I would like to play it again. But I love 4 just because they go to a different part of Silent Hill, like bring a different part of the story in that you have been referenced to, and you have seen multiple things about it, and you actually learn deeper of that story, which I love. Like they're expanding the universe of Silent Hill. Homecoming is a good game once you get past the combat mechanics of it.
It has some good moments.
It has good moments. It's another thing like Silent Hill 4. It brings more of the story in. You learn other things about the neighboring towns, so you learn more of the universe. Downpour was an interesting game. Definitely not one of my favorites, but I enjoyed playing through at least once just because it was more open world. You got to do stuff in more of your own way and like learn different things.
Downpour to me is a lot more like what's that one where you're the author, the horror game?
Alan Wake.
Yeah, so I would say that Downpour to me is kind of like if you mix Silent Hill with Alan Wake.
Yeah,
it's got some more Alan Wake aspects. I personally really enjoyed Downpour the first time. I remember playing through it later and going, yeah, it's not quite as scary as the others, but it actually does have an interesting plot at least. So if you like a game that's a little bit more open world and one that's got a pretty interesting storyline, I would say Downpour's not bad.
Yeah. And then you got what should have been, maybe by far, could have been one of my favorite Silent Hill games ever, and never got developed because Konami's like, we're just going to make slots.
This is what I wanted to talk about.
PT. Just even PT as the playable trailer was one of the most horrific and mind-fucking games you could ever play. Because literally the only reason why I beat PT is because I looked it up on how to beat the trailer.
Yeah, it's a trailer. And it came out as called playable trailer. It wasn't even clear that it was Silent Hill till you beat it, and then it's like Silent Hills, and it's like, oh my gosh, they're making a sequel.
Yeah, and you literally have to like pay attention to certain words that randomly pop up on the screen when you do certain things that trigger it, and like you have to pay attention to so much stuff.
There's this will forever be the game that I'm most disappointed never got made.
Yeah,
because they took I've obviously mentioned my favorite 2 series of all time came from Konami, and that's Metal Gear Solid and Silent Hill. And this was an actual amalgamation of the 2. You had the creator of Metal Gear Solid creating a Silent Hill game, and not just in theory was it going to be good. When you played the playable trailer, it was fantastic. It was so good, and it was so good that all of the recent or most of the recent horror games you see on Steam actually tried to copy that. You got Visage and all these other games that have become really popular on Steam in the horror community that are directly influenced by PT and its first-person creepy style.
Yes.
And I was so excited for that game. And eventually Kojima that left Konami because they don't seem to understand when they've got really good talent and they like to screw people over. He actually did create Death Stranding. It's not a game for everybody, but it does have some really fantastic horror elements, and it's got a really amazing plot. So if you are a fan of Metal Gear Solid and don't mind it's a very long game, but if you don't mind a slower game that's got a really it's got elements of stealth, it's got really good horror elements. I mean, that game in parts is as scary as you would expect Silent Hill to be. And it's got a very, very well done plot. It's sci-fi. It's a mixture of tons of things that somehow works. It's not a game for everybody. I'll say that out front. But I enjoyed that, so I was glad to at least get that if I couldn't get Silent Hills.
Yeah.
But and I would say Origins, I haven't finished it yet. I'm streaming it right now. Honestly, the beginning of the game I hated. And once I got past the first level, I was like, oh, wow, actually, the sound design in that game is just fantastic.
Yeah,
like all of them, but it in that one particularly, I feel like they stepped it up a notch. So there are parts of that game that I like as well. I've never played Shattered Memories.
I've never played Shattered Memories.
Don't have much of an interest in playing a Wii game, Silent Hill.
The only reason I have any interest in it is because it is supposed to be like a re-imaging of Silent Hill 1.
Yeah.
Like a different take on it.
I feel like at some point I am going to have to play it.
Yeah, like I want to play it just because of that peer factor. Even if the game sucks, I just want to see what they try to do with it and like get another take on Silent Hill 1, because Silent Hill 1 is I don't care.
It's the quintessential Silent Hill game. It's the best one.
Yeah, you can like fight me. I don't care. Number 1 is the best game. You just can't beat it. It's just so good, and I feel like it holds up so damn good that you just
it's a game that, despite the graphics and the terrible voice acting, is still fantastic.
Yes,
it's still horror distilled. It's amazing.
If I had to rank them, it'd be 1 as number 1, 2 as number 2, and it's a damn hard battle between 3 and 4 for the third spot, honestly. And then it pretty much, like, after that, it just goes as the games go. Like, Homecoming would be number 5. Downpour would be number 6.
I feel like it depends on the day how I would rank the first 4, but I would say the first 4 are all so worth playing that if you like one of them, you'll probably like all of the first 4. And if you're a fan of horror at all, I feel like it's hard to say you're a fan of horror if you haven't played at least a Silent Hill game. And if you've played one, you'll probably want to play most of them, at least the ones that were made by Team Silent, which is 1 through 4. And then if you're into those, the other ones all have their merits. They've all got their downfalls. None of the other ones are as good as the first 4. But I just enjoy this series overall. I know they've made some other weird. So they made a play novel.
Yeah, they made a play novel. They made an iOS game. They made a PSP game that was
I heard the
more
PSP game's stupid,
like combat multiplayer thing.
But at least if you play those ones, the first 4, and then Homecoming's got its merits. Origin's actually pretty good. And Downpour, it's got it. You might like it, you might not. It's really hard to tell.
It's a unique take on it.
It's very different. But I will say that my favorite thing about Homecoming was just I kind of liked the open world for one aspect. You really got to explore the town, and also it had little pockets of horror in it that were not part of the main story that you could find.
Yeah,
and that was so refreshing to me. Be like, okay, this is a totally not entirely necessary part, but it's so scary that it feels like it should have been included in the main story. So you there's so much to find in that game, and story wise, it's at least good. It's not the scariest game. It's not the most well put together game, but I found it to be pretty enjoyable. So
yeah, I could definitely see that.
Yeah, but anyway, that's kind of my whole take on Silent Hill. I hope you guys are enjoying these podcasts, and you've got some good stuff to play for the end of October. I know it's getting to the end of October now, but
November can still be spooky.
Yeah, you don't have to stop in October. It's great to just keep going. I feel like playing horror games throughout the winter is just great because you're locked up and it's dark, and it's even better than October, right?
October is really just the beginning of video game season, anyways. Let's be honest. So you might as well play some spooky games while you're at it.
Yeah. So while you're locked up all winter, enjoy some Silent Hill for sure. Do you have anything else you want to say about the games and the movies?
No. I mean, we talked pretty hardcore about the games in the first one, and there wasn't much to say about this movie, to be honest.
There's not a lot to say about this movie.
Unfortunately, what should have been a good predecessor fell short. Fell very, very short. Yeah.
So thumbs down on the second movie, but everything else I would say definitely check out. Hope you guys have been enjoying the Real Gaming Podcast. I've had Drake, aka Beardculez. You can go follow him at twitch.tv/Beardculez with a Z. I'll put the links in the show notes and the description below, and you can follow me. I'll be playing and streaming some of these games. I like to stream a lot of horror games and obviously stuff I'm going to be covering on the podcast in the future. So check that out at twitch.tv/DirtyMike_TV. And until next time, keep it real.